Well, good to be with you again today. Today, I want to do a really quick devotion on a snowy day. I want to ask a question. Why cannot God use perfect people? Why God cannot use perfect people? You know, I was reading in Matthew chapter 10 where we see Jesus calling 12 men. And they were his disciples to follow him, to learn from him. In those days, rabbis would choose men to follow them and over a period of time do life with them and grow in spiritual maturity. And so Jesus calls these 12 men to himself, and one day he sends them out on this kind of short mission trip. And he calls these 12 men to give them authority over unclean spirits and to cast them out and to give them authority to heal every disease and afflictions. And they were supposed to go to the lost house of Israel and proclaim as they go that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And so we see a list then in Matthew 10 of these 12 disciples. First, there was Peter, who was an enthusiastic, kind of a strong-willed kind of guy, impulsive man. At times, he was kind of a little brash. Peter had several failings we read about in his life, including the big one, denying that he even knew Jesus after walking with him for 3 years when Jesus was arrested. And then there was Andrew, which kind of seemed to always live in the shadow of his older brother Peter. And then we see the name James, who was the brother of John, who both had character flaws and were kind of brash. They were braggers. They were boasters. They wanted to know who was going to be the greatest in the kingdom of heaven. They were even at one time wanting to call down fire from heaven on those that disagreed with Jesus, and then later asked Jesus if they could sit next to him on his throne in heaven. We can't forget Philip. The scholars tell us he was a bit plain. He was kind of a cautious, plain guy, a little bit slow at realizing that Jesus was the Son of the living God. He was the one that when Jesus was feeding 5,000, that Jesus asked Philip, said, where are we going to get the bread to feed all these people that have been following us? And Jesus asked them this to test his faith. Then there was Bartholomew, who hung out close with Philip, and he too needed a little more convincing about Jesus as the Son of God. Some scholars believe he was also called Nathanael, who said, what good thing can come out of Galilee? Then there's Thomas. We all remember Thomas, who walked with Jesus for over 3 years. And after Jesus rose from the dead and presented himself to certain people, he still didn't believe. He still needed convincing that Jesus really rose from the dead. Thus, we have the term doubting Thomas. Then there's Matthew, the tax collector. Well, we all know what people thought and think of tax collectors. And then there was James, the son of Alphaeus, who was, some scholars tell us, was a very, very quiet man that was just always hanging out in the background. Then there was Thaddeus, who was not afraid to interrupt Jesus. When Jesus appeared to his disciples after the resurrection, Thaddeus broke in the middle of the conversation that Jesus was speaking and said, Lord, why are you going to reveal yourself only to us? Why not to the whole world? And then the last two we'll look at is Simon the Zealot. Of course, he's called Simon the Zealot for a reason, because he was a member before he was called by Christ. He was a member of the Zealots' political movement. And the Zealots were a party that was really zealous for Jewish independence from Roman rule. Finally, last but not least, was Judas Iscariot, who was also very zealous in his beliefs. And when Jesus didn't fulfill his beliefs in his own eyes, he tried to take matter in his own hands, which ended up betraying Jesus. We know that Judas was a zealot by his surname, Iscariot. Researchers believe that he was part of what they call dagger men. They were a group of ultra zealots who carried around a knife with him at all times, prepared to assassinate anyone that was a traitor against the Jewish nation. So here we go back to the question, why doesn't God use perfect people? Well, the answer is simple, because there never were any. There never were any perfect people, and still there never are any today. God calls people from all kinds of various backgrounds, imperfections, to come and follow him, to learn from him, to be discipled by him. You know, as the Apostle Paul, who himself in his previous life was a chief persecutor of Jesus, said this. In Philippians 3, he wrote, "One thing I do, I forget what lies behind, and I strain forward to what lies ahead. I press on towards the goal for the prize of the upward call of Christ." Something to think about today, friends. If you're feeling discouraged or down, just realize God uses imperfect people. Something to think about. Until next time, may God bless you.